Welcome, everyone, to the fourth webinar, on baptism that the churches in the Nordic countries are hosting. This is a webinar on communicating baptism, and we have already a group of distinguished presenters with us. The reason we chose this theme is that the churches have engaged in various ways as a response to decline in number of baptisms, to sort of counteract, to communicate the meaning of baptism. And we can now all hear from some of the creative ways that they have engaged in. Before we start, I would like to say a few practical words. One is that in 1 hour exactly, we will go into breakout groups in different languages. And it's very important that you are all, that the name that is displayed when you come in is the same as you registered with. So please, if you have a different name there, click on the right-hand corner of your screen where there is a little box with dots, and you can find one of the options is to rename and rename yourself. I would, this is, as I say, the fourth webinar, and we have unusually many presenters. I know that you are all eager to hear what they have to say. And I would just like to introduce already the first presenter, which is Ingeborg Dybvig. She is a director of communication department in the Church of Norway. And Ingeborg, please, welcome. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Steinun. I'm really happy that you arranged this webinar, and I'm very pleased to be able to share some of the things we do in Norway. And I will now try to share my screen. Let me see. And then like this. Okay, so I will just move forward quickly because I'm rushing through a lot of information within my 15 minutes time slot. And I would like to start with some facts about the situation in Norway. In 2020, last year, the very special year, our percentage of the children being baptized in Norway was down to 43%, which is down from 50 in 2019. And of course, we think that at least part of the reason for this is the corona situation, but we don't really know whether this is a kind of new reality, because the numbers have been going down for the last years. We have huge geographical variations from 64% in Møre, which is on the northwest coast of Norway, and down to 23% in Oslo. So there are really big differences within the country. Every year for the last years, between 1,000 and 1,200 teenagers have been baptized. And what we see in general is an increasing number of what we call the drop-in baptism, where congregations have, you can sort of drop by on a Saturday, for instance, and be baptized, or bring your baby or your child, or it could be yourself. So that is increasing in popularity. Also, we see that it's important with flexibility. And that's also really an experience after this corona year. I will get back to that. I'm going to show you a little bit about our members, because I think it's a good background. In Norway, 3.7 million people are members of the Church of Norway, and this is approximately 70% of the population. And we have, for the last few years, we've done a survey among our members, and what we know is that we can divide them into 3 groups, and approximately 24% are what we call the red group, and they are very distant from the church. They are still members, but they hardly ever use the church. And almost the same amount are green, and they use the church 12 times or more every year. So they are in general what we call the active persons. But then the huge majority is the yellow group. They are more than half of our members, and they are quite clear that they want to stay as members, but they don't really use the church. And in general, we are focusing a lot on this group. Also, just a quick glimpse on the gender and age. So as you can see, the age between 30 and 39 and 40 to 49, that's where the red group is quite big, and also the green group is very small. And we think that, of course, these 2 age groups are very important when we talk about baptism, because within these groups you find the parents who make the decisions. I'm going to just say a little bit about our external campaigns and approach. And I want to emphasize the fact that what I'm showing you here is really what we do on national level, because there's a lot of things going on in each diocese as well. Of course, some of them use what we make on a national level, but also quite a lot of them do sort of more kind of bespoken campaigns for their diocese and the situation in their diocese. Social media is extremely important, obviously. And even though you see on these pictures that they're mainly babies and small children, we actually also emphasize that you can be baptized even though if you are a grown-up person or a teenager. We are quite, we try to sort of have all the different ads very tailor-made to the different target groups. And we are emphasizing more and more that you can come, you're welcome, whatever age, whether it's Sunday or every day. A lot of our congregations are now offering small ceremonies on Saturdays, for instance, or even during the week. Also, we are emphasizing that you can have a big party or a small party. You don't need a lot of guests, because we know that some people hesitate because they think that they have to have these kind of very glossy party, lots of guests, lots of gifts, etc. We're trying to get away from this this way of sort of looking at what a baptism is. The next 2 here are from Instagram, and they are, I would have liked to show you the films, but they are in Norwegian, so that's why I don't do that. But what we have done is we have talked to a lot of parents who have been considering whether their child should be baptized, and we have focused on their kind of reasons for either saying no or yes. And for instance, this one in the middle is about a family who where the mother didn't want the baby to be baptized, the father wanted him to be, and they kind of did they traded. The mother said, okay, if the baby can have my surname, it's okay with the baptism. In Norway, a lot of couples, they might not have the same surname. So we have created these stories. You find them as films on our website, you find them on social media, you also find them as stories as such. We have had success with paid commercials in the big newspapers. VG is the biggest newspaper in Norway, and these we have several of these, and they have had really very, very good attention and lots of traffic into our website, where they could read more about what is baptism within the church, how do you do it, etc. So this is a story about a father who said he didn't really want his daughter to be baptized, and then they changed their mind, they did, and they are talking about their experience within the church and how this actually became a very, very good experience as well. Yes, this is another one where actually 3 siblings were baptized at the same time. And this went almost viral because it has a really good news edge to it as well. And that's what we're trying to look for, stories that can be interesting sort of within the main media as such. We use YouTube more and more strategically, and we are also working on Google. And I suppose you do the same, but we see that we to really work with search engine optimization, it's important to actually reach through. Yes, we have made info material for hospitals' maternity wards. They are kind of freebies, and we also know that this actually comes through because it's popular within the maternity wards to use this. We also have an internal approach. How do we support the local church? And we have made a lot of different material that can be used by the local congregations. We have webinars for our fellow colleagues. How do the local church communicate around baptism? How do we use the church building, for instance? How do we use the symbols? And these webinars have become quite popular. It's a way of focusing on and also sharing ideas, of course, within the different parts of the country and the church. We have what we call Ressursbanken, which is a bank of resources. And there you have lots of material linked to baptism. It's how to plan, there's lots of photos, films, logos, illustrations, texts, articles, social media material, templates for printed material, etc. This is an open website for both those working within the church, but also others who are kind of supporting in the local congregation. Also, from national level, we have regular coordination meetings with all the dioceses in the Church of Norway. And this has proved really important because it's been a forum where people can share their ideas, events, material, and it has helped the kind of internal flow of information of what is going on around the country. So moving forward, we are still sort of really looking into all the different experiences after the Corona year and how this will change the approach in general. We have planned a new campaign, which is external and which will go really broad out to within different media and so on. And that will be very targeted towards the yellow group, those who want to belong to the church as members, but who are quite distant. And this is being worked on now, and it's a bit too early to present anything because we haven't really landed the approach yet. We have also started to work on a new approach towards the 13, 14 years olds who are planning to have the confirmation but are not baptized. And we also want to further improve the cross-country and interdisciplinary ownership and cooperation linked to baptism, because we see that everyone within the church have important roles. It could be the person answering the phone call from parents who are just checking out what is it to be baptized within the Church of Norway, for instance. How are they met? And it's about the deacon or the priest. It's sort of the whole range of the different roles within the church. And we also know that flexibility and close cooperation are really important factors. During the Corona year, hopefully not many years more, we see that all these small ceremonies where maybe only the parents and witnesses and the priest have been present, we have had sort of reactions back on that, saying that this was a fantastic experience. We felt that it was really made for us. We could sort of really participate in what was going on, etc. So there is a lot of experience that we are still sort of looking into to see how we can further improve on it and how we can really do it and offer different opportunities for those who are looking into whether they should either be baptized themselves or have their child baptized. And I think that we have learned that we probably need to think broader and different, that one size does not fit all anymore. And that's important. And this will affect the communications as well. We are planning a new membership survey or member survey now, a little bit later around the summer, where we will try to find out more about the members and their needs and expectations towards the church, also when looking at baptism. And we will focus on different and maybe also smaller target groups and have even more tailor-made communications towards the different groups. And this will be films, this will be commercial stuff, this will be texts on the website, this will also be podcasts, etc. So that's where we are at the moment. And if you want to know anything else, I want to have any details, please get in touch with me. I'm just happy to answer on anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingeborg, for this very interesting and very informative introduction. And I'm sure that there will be many questions from our participants on the sort of the practicalities and the thinking behind what you're doing. And I just want to underline that after our breakout session, which is in 1 hour or in 40 minutes, after the breakout session, we will have a plenary discussion. So you will have the possibility of sending questions for our discussion then. So if you have questions already that you want to write, you can send them to Harald Hegstad, who is here, or there's also a possibility of if you want to have a question that everybody sees, then you can send it in the general chat. But if you want the question to be specifically tailored for Ingeborg and not in the general chat, then you send it to Harald Hegstad. Now, the Diocese of Lund in Sweden had a 10-year project on baptism, where they looked at all aspects of communicating baptism. And we have two persons from Lund here with us, Lena Andersson, who was a project leader on the project baptism, and Marcel Salinder, communications officer for project baptism in the Diocese of Lund. And without further ado, I will share the floor with you.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
just share my screen. Now I think everything looks fine. Communication about baptism, experiences and knowledge from the Diocese of Lund, and 10 years focus on baptism. During our little session now, we will try to present a couple of communicative perspectives, and that takes its starting point from the sole individual and the parish as a collective body. And it's kind of difficult to really concentrate 10 years of focus on this endless matter, but we'll give it a best shot. When we present matters of baptism, we always take the starting point in ourselves.
Hi, I'm Lena, and this is the church, Vinbergs Church in Falkenberg, where I was baptized. in the 27th of May in 1965. And before we had our first meeting in the project group, one of the colleagues, she suggested that we should start by telling about our own baptism. And my first thought then was, why? Is that something important? Because I didn't know so much about my own baptism. But I said, okay, let's do that. And the day came for the meeting. We were 5 people in the project group, and 2 knew very, very much, and 2 knew some things, and I didn't know nothing. But something happened to me when I heard the other stories, and suddenly I became very curious, and I wanted to know more about my own baptism.
This is me on the 5th of February 1978 in St. Andrew's Church in Malmo. I usually use this picture as a kind of a time marker. You can see it's all about the 70s show if you judge from the tie that my father wears. My family came, I have relatives in the Netherlands, and they came all the way from the south of Netherlands to attend my baptism. So it was a fairly large event in our family. This is usually where we take our starting point when we talk about baptisms. We take the perspective from the sole individual. What does it mean to me? And that has been kind of a success factor for us. We always try to ground it in ourselves.
And then just a small background. We started with taking focus on baptism in 2006. And that was after the Diocesan Synod sent out a questionnaire to the parishes asking what subjects, what was most important to get support and help with. And one of them was baptism. So when we started, it was the purpose was to deepening the understanding of baptism on all levels, from the theological understanding to questions about why someone chooses or does not choose to baptize their child. And this purpose has followed our work throughout the years. Then, based on what we discovered, changes in society and people's views on baptism, 2 other targets were added. And one of them was removing obstacles that gave the consequence that parents choose not to baptize their children, or that a teenager or an adult choose not to get baptized. And the other was turning the trend of downward baptism statistics. And what we discovered early was that communication was a key issue in all 3 perspectives.
So a couple of key arguments for our presentation today is one, the church does not own the image of baptism. That means we are one communicator in this mediated landscape, but a lot of other people are communicating about baptism as well. Everybody in the parish should be involved. That goes from employees to trustees to members. We have to carry this together in order to get a successful communication. And being baptized is to have a mission to communicate, really. That lies in the baptism mission. So to the first perspective, people we meet already have images of baptism. Now, we take the assumption sometimes that many people don't know that much about baptism. But our perspective is really people we meet already have a lot of images. They can have their own experiences from baptism they have attended, perhaps their own if they've been baptized as adults. But there are a lot of other sources that also tell a lot about baptism. For instance, this one is from one of the newspapers. It depicts one of the royal baptisms. It says, kind of coziness, fun and games and tears at the idyllic baptism. Now, this is the royal family. It comes in that context, but of course, it gives me, as a member of the church, images of how a baptism can be, or perhaps must it be this way? This is also another image. This is from Ingeborg's presentation as well. We saw this with drop-in baptisms. Is this a way, how is this in some way conflicting or completing my image of baptism, how it works? What is drop-in? Now, when we started working with drop-in baptism in the Diocese of Lund, it was really a media success story because a lot of newspapers wanted to portray this new event because this was something new. And you go to new media, we look at influencers, for instance. This is from one influencer, she's quite big in Sweden. Her name is Helen Torsgården. She runs a kind of a makeup vlog. It's not my usual where I go to, but I suppose a lot of people look at this blog. Now, they recorded the entirety of the baptism of their youngest daughter, Selma. Now, what's interesting about this is she has about almost 500,000 of subscribers to her channel, YouTube channel. And this clip about Selma's baptism was shown, I think, about 300,000 times. Now, that kind of shows the impact of how a baptism can be. If you compare it to one of the larger newspapers in Sweden, for instance, Dagens Nyheter, that has about 300 subscribers. How do we measure the impact, and how can we see what happens in people's how they get their images of baptism? Another image is this kind of a cultural phenomena. We have all the traditions. This is also from the newspaper. We had one of these one people who was always engaged as kind of what are the traditions in Sweden? How do you do it? Who will carry the child to the baptism? Who should be godparents? What gifts do I bring? What happens with the baptismal water and so on? And all these things combine to images that I have of baptism. One very common thing in Sweden is also the usage of the word baptism. This is from the public transport sector, and it's one of the more famous football players, Berang Safari, who played in Malmö FF. And he talked about naming one of the public transport trains. So you say baptize the train, you baptize a bus, just like you do for boats and such things. Now all these things come together. And you have the commercial aspect as well as for gifts. This is from one commercial web store. How do we do it? What kind of gifts do I bring? And all this comes up to what is the image that the other person has when we try to talk to them as a church? And what is the image that we want to complete with to get the whole picture, so to speak?
And then perspective 2, to tell and talk about baptism as a parish. Since people already have pictures of baptism, a parish must think about what images is missing. What is the church story? What do we want and what should we communicate about baptism? Who is the target group and what channels and arenas are possible to use? And in our project and in the educations we have now, we always start with the groups. We think that people in the parish together need to deepen the understanding and find direction and ways to go. So we like them to start talking about baptism with each other, in the staff, with the church council, and with volunteers. And start with their own story, with their own baptism and what it means to them to be baptized. And also look at statistics. What does it say? What is hidden behind the numbers? And in what context is the parish set to operate? How does it look? And also, how do the parish already work with baptism? To give the whole parish the bill, the figure, so everyone knows how it is. And at last, what is the vision for baptism in the parish? And then it's good to develop an action plan for baptism with a communication plan. And as we said in the beginning, and Ingeborg also said it, all the staff is involved in baptism. You can say, if you take an infant baptism as an example, the parish educator and the children workers meets both parents and children in activities, and they talk about baptism. The communicator perhaps answer questions on social medias, and the administrator sends out invitations and take care of the booking of the service. In Sweden, we have something we call housewives, the caretaker of the parish center. Perhaps she or he is the one who shows the room for the party after the baptism. And then we have the verger in the church, prepares it, welcomes the family, and take care of the practical things. And the musicians, of course, talks to the family about hymns, solo songs, and plays. And the priest have a meeting before the service with the family to talk about baptism. And of course, it's the priest who baptized the child. And we also need to think about how we talk about baptism at our other personal church sermons, confirmation, marriage, funerals. As you know, it's in these services we meet a lot of people. How do we talk about baptism in our Sunday service? How often do we preach about baptism? And what objects and methods can we have in the liturgy that make the message even clearer and more inclusive? And here's an example of a parish that had a themed service around baptism. And they showed the parish baptismal dresses and the gifts that you get at a baptism. And the picture to the right, it's a service from the River Jordan with a baptismal reminder. And that's an order we have in the latest altar book now in Sweden. And then we have all the other activities: open house, children's groups, youth groups, choirs, sewing clubs, pilgrimages, church evenings, Bible study groups, and more. So it's just to let the imagination flow and find forms and context where you can talk about baptism in the parish.
Perspective 3, to visualize baptism as a parish. Well, this is one very concrete example from one of our parishes who started. This is a very traditional mailing campaign, so to speak, but the idea behind it was, what is the first thing we want to say to the family? Well, we send them a postcard, and the first thing we want to say, it's not to invite them for baptism, we want to say congratulations. You are in our mind, in our prayers, really. This is a great event for the family. And then in step 2, we take it to the invitation for a party. We call it wasn't invitation for a baptism, it was invitation for a party of life, so to speak. But that is one way of working communicatively with the parish. These are other objects how to visualize baptism in the parish. You have on top, you have the pacifiers. If you just have the image of what everyday things or products around the family with the child could be used as a communicator for baptism, for instance. The pacifier had the baptism loves presence, loves trust, for instance. You have a water bottle with the baptism loves water, for instance. And you have this small child with a body, I think it's called, in Sweden it's called body, it says baptized, really. That is another example on how to make church members communicating baptism and be kind of ambassadors for the baptism. This is a very classical image from a parish home in Sweden. On the image on the right is a kind of an exhibition of how it used to be with baptismal memories and kind of cards and service orders and so on. And the image on the right, on the left, depicts what are we doing right now. And this is a nice way of showing that things happen over the course of time, and baptism is the kind of the silver lining between all times. This is another way, exhibitions in the parish homes, kind of a more modern touch with great roll-ups or a gigantic baptismal dress. This dress on the left, you can actually go under it and go in. And so that is a way of kind of, getting a feel for the baptismal dress. If you at the baptismal fonts that we have in our churches, one thing we aren't as good with are explaining what should we do. This baptismal font was actually from Australia, I think, but we had a very nice sign when Lena visited. It said, "At baptism, people are signed with the cross sign of the cross and encouraged to live as disciples of Christ and keep the faith. You are invited to cross sign yourself with the blessed water in this font as a reminder of your own baptism." Now, that's a very good service to people who enter the church. They can feel the water inside the baptismal font and also have kind of an action plan, do something. This is something that's also big in Sweden. It's called baptismal tree. This is actually in the form of a drop in the center of the church. Now, what you do with this tree or drop is you hang small crystals for every child that is baptized. Now, that is a constant reminder for those who enter the church, reminder for them of their own baptism, and also communicating who has been baptized recently. Now, it's very common that also the children are invited back in a couple of months or half a year or so to collect their baptismal gift, this little crystal, for instance, at a special service. That is also one way of working, of visualizing. And of course, our webpage. In our project, we worked a lot with kind of building a centralized website for baptism that aimed to explain the overarching church image or church, what we want to say about the baptism. Then we also know that people will discuss it on different forums, on Facebook and different media. And another way is if we take baptism into town. This is a picture from Malmo as well. We had some theater, walking theater. It's a city guide, really, with baptism in focus on a couple of central locations in the city. You can also do arts, write songs, make films, for instance. All different media work together to communicate baptism.
Perspective 4. Being baptized is to have a mission to communicate. As baptized, we receive the mission just like Jesus' disciples. God has confidence in all of us in this important matter, to spread the message of love and hope. And we all live with our experience of life in general, with our faith and with our life in the church. So, when we as an individual communicate and talk about baptism, it is based on our lives and our own experiences. In our Lutheran Church, we are all authorized to do this. So when we tell, we can carry with us the idea that the word of mouth-to-mouth method creates rings that spreads, that we are involved in making baptism a thing, something you talk about. So let's all become baptismal communicators, where we tell about baptism, talk about baptism, answer questions like, I am baptized, why? Why should we let our child be baptized? Why should I as a teenager be baptized? Why should I as an adult be baptized? And we believe that everyone can and should be able to answer these questions. And here we see an example of someone telling about baptism on Facebook. Maybe it's a godparent, maybe it's a sibling, a grandmother, a mom, or just a friend.
Thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit about our experiences and knowledge from the Diocese of Lund and our 10 years focus of baptism. And I hope there are things that you can take with you.
Thank you very much, Marcel and Lena, for this interesting and incredibly informative presentation. Again, I would like to remind everyone that if you have questions to them, you can send them now to Harald Hegstad, or if you can also send questions into the general chat, but then everyone will see it, and perhaps there will be responses and chat there afterwards. Again, on practical notes, because people have been entering, let me remind everyone that the name that is displayed now in front of you on your screen needs to be the same name as you registered with, in order for Jonas to be able to put you in a breakout group in a little while. And you can change your name by clicking to the right-hand corner, the 3 little dots. You'll find rename under there. But we do not have too much time to linger here, because our next presenter is from Iceland, and that would be a little bit of a switch. The Church of Iceland has not entered into any big campaigns on baptism, but it is they have been focusing on the Green Church, and now we will see a link between the Green Church and baptism, and it's Halldór Reynisson, a project leader from the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Iceland. Halldór, gjör svo vel.
Yes, hello everyone. I've just come into this from the sideline because what I'm doing for the ELCA, the Lutheran Church in Iceland, is the environmental issues. I used to be a pastor for 20-odd years, and just to begin with, let me tell you a short story. Christianity is very much about telling a story. Last year, during a break from the COVID situation here in Iceland, I attended a party. There was a woman who was 40 years old. And as we were just having a good time there, I met this young man who happened to be in a confirmation class that when I was a pastor in rural Iceland 25 years ago. And he told me that something I had given to him on the day he was confirmed was still around in his original home. His mother and father were still keeping a watch on that tree that I had given him on this particular day, this big festive day in his life. When I was a country pastor, I used to go around visiting the confirmants on the days of their confirmation, and I presented each one with a tree, telling them that they should keep a watch on this tree, they should plant it, see it grow, and as the tree grows, they should grow as human beings. So that was the message. Now, it coincides with a project that was started last year in the church here in Iceland, where a similar idea came up that we should have this kind of symbolism of growth, symbolism of nature, symbolism of the greenness of life by giving to each and every child who is baptized in our church a tree. So we have been working on that idea since last year. We started it in a way last year, but we are going to take this idea further during this year when we are through this COVID thing, which is, of course, affecting the lives and what we are doing in the church quite a lot. But it's just a very simple idea. We are trying to find places in each deanery in Iceland, we have 9 deaneries. We wouldn't call it dioceses because it's not that. Places where we will have a small forest grove or something like that. And there we will plant 1 tree in this deanery for each child who is baptized in the church. Now, it can be the family of the child who goes there, or even the confirmants, together with the local pastor, in order to plant this tree. And it will also give an opportunity to have a kind of outdoors church service, just out in the open, in God's green environment, and also emphasizing not just the baptism, but also our role, our responsibility as human beings in the natural world. So that's just a very simple, good idea which we are putting into effect. I believe that people learn by doing. This is something that we are doing tangentially. We are doing something, we're not just talking, we are doing something. And this also, in my view, relates to the sacrament, because it has been said about the sacrament, it's an outward side of an inner reality. And this is kind of an outward sign, the tree, planting a tree, taking care of a tree. This is an outward sign of the inner reality, which is manifested in the little child, or a big child, or the grown-up who has been baptized in the church. As the tree is supposed to grow and bear fruit, so each and every individual which we baptize is supposed to grow spiritually and also as a human being. So this is more or less what we are planning on doing, and have just started last year. And that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Halldór. Again, a reminder, if you have questions for our discussions after the breakout rooms, you can send them to Harald Hegstad, or you can put them in the general chat to everyone, but then everyone, of course, will see them. I should also mention that in our general discussion later, there is a possibility, if you want to say something, you send a note to Harald that you'll ask for the word. Now, we also have a presentation from Finland, from Laura Kokkonen. She's going to give a comment or a response to what has been said here, and tell us a little bit about Finland. Laura is a doctoral researcher in the University of Helsinki. And I think, Laura, I will give you the word now, please.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon. So my name is Laura Kokkonen, and I'm working on my PhD in the study of religions at the University of Helsinki, Finland. And I presume I can get my slides show on screen now. Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to hear and comment this interesting topic. And thank you, all the speakers who indeed have showed a variety of this field in different Nordic countries. I found it very interesting to learn about these concrete actions and thoughts behind them. So just talking about baptism campaigns, in Finnish Church, there has to organized a baptism project in years 2018 and 2020. But since I'm not focused on that specific project, nor am I a church representative, I will not be focusing on it. And presumably someone else will cover those themes in this webinar series. But just shortly, this project, Kaste ja Kummius, Baptism and God Parenting, a strongly entangled themes, did utilize social media and influencer marketing, especially with God Parenting for YouTubers and bloggers who are recruited. I found this really interesting, but also as a method, influencer marketing is very popular in today's advertising culture. So talking from my perspective, in my ongoing research, I have studied the Finnish folk churches, both the Evangelical Lutheran Church and the Orthodox Church of Finland, which are a majority and minority church in Finland. And I will naturally here contemplate the matter more on the Lutheran side. Well, since I'm not finished with my research yet, I will today offer some viewpoints I've contemplated. And even I'm commenting based on my observations, based on Finnish case, I still believe these observations may concern other Nordic churches as well, for their situation is somewhat similar. So in my study, I've asked how church communications are changing and how churches utilize methods based on marketing communications. I utilize the concept of brand and branding in order to define how church may apply branding and how Finnish churches are discussing about it in their communications. So branding is mostly a method or a viewpoint of investigating communications. And with branding, I simply mean a way of actively affecting on church image. And actually the discussion on new ways communicating baptism comes really close to this theme. So traditionally, rites are the ones where Finns engage with the church, baptism as one of them. And with the historically strong status, the Finnish Lutheran Church has traditionally not basically had any need to highlight itself or try to create a positive image. However, according to statistics of previous decades, and as the basis for this entire webinar series, the current trajectory in Finland as well is that people seem to become more detached from the established churches. The often used phrase is how churches can be placed in a situation of generalized religious secular competition when various religious and non-religious leisure activities and mindsets challenge commitment to churches. So in a way, it's obvious that this forces churches to review or renegotiate their communications. If I may give the next slide, please. So one example of how I have seen a church may utilize branding or image building is campaigning. Yes, this is the correct slide, thank you. As one part of my study, I've studied parish election campaigns since they were the only repeated campaign in Finland. And the way I see these campaigns form a platform to enter the public field with a well-thought message. I unfortunately can't take any stand here whether it's an effective method or not, since I have not focused on the reception side, but the organizational side. But from this perspective, any campaign is a possibility for church to try to reshape their message in the public. What is the message church wants people to see, to know, and to feel? And something that has happened in Finland is that the Lutheran Church has embraced more its societal role and underlined church as an important actor than offering the devotional message. As Dobler has well said, it's something where our transcendence is diminished and religious community becomes more connected to secular aspects. And in this process, our values and ethics are emphasized instead of religious aspects. So in a way, it's a form of what I've chosen to call renegotiating communications for churches adjust their communications. In marketing, it's all about choosing the message and implementing the concept of brand here. People are keen to connect with brands they see to represent a lifestyle they wish to be associated with. So from a marketing perspective, it does seem underlining value of church membership in general is the main question also when talking about baptism. What is the value, the meaning of being a church member? I was following the first webinar where Josephine Skans said how baptism is the basis of membership. And as true as it may be, marketing baptism probably needs to see further all the way to that meaning and the main message of the church. For people feeling the value of membership, are presumably more likely to baptize their children. However, this is truly a complicated challenge for churches, and I will be just interested to follow how this entire process will continue to develop in the future. Overall, I find it very interesting how these phenomena touch Nordic churches and how reaction in churches have been somewhat similar in that sense, that there are responses and actions. So I will end my comments here. Thank you. And in the last slide here, you just can see how you can reach me or just join me on social media. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura Kokkonen, for this timely reminder about branding, which is something that, of course, is part of what we had in the former presentations, but not with that name. But it is a question exactly of the value. What is the value of baptism and being baptized, and why should I baptize my child? I would now like to take a few minutes to ask the core group that organizes these webinars are all organized by a core group of researchers from the Nordic countries. And I would like now to ask if any of them would like to add or respond. We have about 5 minutes before we are going into the breakout rooms. So if there's anything that you want to give us a response to these talks or add to it, now is the time. Harald.
Yes, what's interesting in all types of communication is the relationship between content and form. So a question that we may go into in the groups and also afterwards in the plenary session is are we just marketing an old content, or are we adapting the content to new forms or to new audiences? I heard what Laura said, that seems to be some relation here between the sort of devotional, transcendent message of the church on the one hand, and the more societal, immanent on the other hand. And of course, that's has been and is a tension in the ways that Nordic folk churches are working, and it's interesting to see how that plays out in the question of communicating baptism. So, but I'm sure we will return to those types of questions afterwards.
Yeah, Yuri or Karin or Jonas? I see no sign. I would like to add one food for thought for our discussion in the plenary afterwards. And this is my question to the speakers, really. The presentations that you've shown, I know Laura actually said that she didn't know about the reception, but because she hasn't studied that. But for Norway and Sweden, was there any study on the reception of these different campaigns and whether they changed anything in time in either people's perspective on baptism or indeed the numbers? So that would be my question to leave with the speakers. Now we are going into the breakout groups, and they are aligned. There is an English group, and then there are the different national language groups. So we invite the groups to form questions to send back, either after the meeting or during the plenary, or indeed to share stories and comments about what they have heard. And the breakout will be 20 minutes. So 20 past 12 in Iceland, 20 past 2 Central European time, we will come back to this room again. We are now in the plenary discussion session, and you are all invited to participate. I would like to say once more, you can either send a question directly to Harald Hegstad, or you can, especially if you want to comment yourself, if you want to be given the floor, or you can send it to all in the general chat. So you will if you're not used to Zoom, you go to the chat function, which is at the bottom, and there you can either send a question to everyone or you can send it to a participant. So just to start, can I send a question to the speakers from Norway and Sweden, to Ingeborg, Lena and Marcel, about whether or not you had measured any response to the different campaigns that you had?
I can start. It's difficult. What we do measure all the time, and of course what we can measure is, for instance, number of readers, number of views, number of clicks, etc. We can also register, for instance, number of visits to our website, because all the different campaigns and things we do are always pointing to the website where we talk about baptism. And so we can see that some campaigns actually, for instance, this paid commercials in the newspapers, they had really much higher number of visits to the website than the benchmark, almost a double of the benchmark. So, which is good. But of course, then what we really want is, of course, people to actually say, okay, I want my child to be baptized. And that is really difficult to measure, obviously. And I mean, if we look at the numbers in general are going down. I didn't mention that we've had actually cinema commercials in several cities in Norway, where the commercials were targeted to the kind of family films, so that we knew that the audience would probably be younger families and people, you know, who are either they have small children or they are about to have more small children. And there we could see that actually the numbers of visitors to the websites increased quite a lot. But then, of course, it's difficult to know whether it actually had any concrete impact. So it's an ongoing challenge, but I think it is really important to set some kind of goals on how many, sort of what kind of numbers do we want to have from the different campaigns, and work on that.
I shall try to answer your question. When we started in 2006, it wasn't the numbers we were looking at. It was to deepening the understanding. It really was that. So if we measure that, the parishes that we worked with, they really said that it was like that. And in many ways, because some of them said they have never in the staff talked about baptism. Just like, you know, checking the calendar, who's doing it, who will have the baptisms on Sunday, things like that, but not really talked about it. What does it mean for us to be a church who baptize children or adults or teenagers, confirmants, and so on? They have never been talking about it. And what does it mean for me in my life? So in that way, and the thing that also happened was that they also started to talk about baptism in the other activities that they had. And in that way, they meant that they deepened the understanding for the families and so on, the people, the parish, all of the parish. But then when after some years, we also had this turning the trend of downward baptism statistics. And what we could see was there were some parishes that the figures went up. There was some of them, and there were some of them that didn't go so, how to say, it didn't go so fast down. It was more like a slower way down. So it was different. And we had 3 of the victors we went and interviewed after the project had stopped. The 3 of them where the figures had gone up, and we asked them what was the clue what was it that made this? And they all said it was, some of it was just because we started to talk about it and to think about it in a way that they haven't done before. And the third we had, it was that to remove obstacles. And the obstacles were that kind of obstacles that they didn't know that they had. Obstacles that just were there, and they didn't have thought that that could be an obstacles. And they had removed them as well, just to make it sort of easier to come and get your child baptized, and also to make the families, when it was an infant, more included in the service. Yeah.
There were a lot of parishes. A couple of parishes also said this. We have a lot of work to do, and when we fill our calendars with everything, it's not that easy to focus on issues. And what our project did was really to kind of focus in on one issue, the issue of baptism, for a longer period of time, and that was a key to make it that turning the trend, or where it's an issue that was in focus. So I think that was one of the keys, that the issue could come firsthand.
Thank you. And the long time as well. I mean, 10 years, that's quite a long time frame to focus. So gives a lot of opportunities. Yeah, sorry.
And in that time frame, you also, as you have in all projects, you go down like up and down. So that's where the long perspective helps, really, because it's not in a half a year or a year. You have to have a longer perspective in our work and have a vision, as Lena said in our presentation as well.
Harald, have you had any questions sent?
Sure, we have some questions, and there is also room for more. The first question has, I think, been already answered from Birger Nygaard, who asks, how do you measure effect of marketing efforts in terms of actual extra baptisms? I think that has already been answered. And then there is a question from Morten Sørensen, which is a question to Ingeborg. Which is related to this coloring code system from Norway. And he asks, are there any data on the youth group in the yellow group? What is the success rate in changing their minds? Are there any implication that the downward curve can be turned around? So that's on the youth in the yellow. Is there any, have you seen at different age groups?
We have, what to answer on that? I suppose that this is linked to baptism, youth and baptism. I don't have any, it's a focus area at the moment to work on this sort of 13, 14-year-olds and approach towards them linked to confirmation, because a lot of them are not baptized. But I don't really have any good answers to that. We are sort of using this these surveys quite a lot especially now linked to confirmation, actually, and we have a TikTok campaign which has proved really, really interesting. Where we have had the same campaign on Instagram and TikTok, and we see very different results, which is quite interesting, linked to these two channels, but that's linked to confirmation and not to baptism. So we can probably use this more towards the young group. Probably not a very good answer, but the best I can give at the moment.
Are you satisfied with the answer, Morten? Or do you want to add something? You are nodding. Okay, good. And then there is a question from Martin Rønkilde, which is a comment to Marcel and Lena, which comments on your own baptism as a starting point. And he asks, could the practice of infant baptism be the major obstacle? The images of baptism we know are those that we encounter as parents and godparents, etc. And would not the teens and adults that choose baptism voluntarily be the only ones with powerful personal baptismal narratives? So how do we tell about the baptism, our own baptism, when we were baptized in an age where we don't remember anything? Would Marcel and Lena give a comment on that?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go first.
Yeah, you go first.
Well, if I can use you, Lena. You didn't
can
know
use me.
anything. Yeah, no, I can't use in that way. Your example, you didn't know anything, but you started to investigate. Now something happens to us humans when we're committed to investigating things. We're getting a little bit curious, and we have to talk to parents, godparents, friends, relatives who were there. What happened then? So I think we have to kind of foster the curiosity to find it out, really, to find something out. What happened? And there are generally very, very powerful narratives. We believe we've heard over the years, we've encountered a lot of people who shared all the different stories from the north of Sweden to the south of Sweden, and we all have the different contexts in which baptism has taken place, and winter, summer, and it really brings the stories to life. So I guess curiosity really to spur that.
For me, the most important thing is what the baptism means for me today. So that is what I would tell a teenager or an adult. What does it mean for me to be baptized now? Not to talk about the day when I was baptized.
Okay, there's a sort of follow-up question here from Leif Johannes. He says that when people talk about baptism and what it means for themselves, do you get an impression of what actually is important for church members when it comes to its content? So one thing is to say that it is important, but what is important in baptism? Could you be more specific?
Not depends. It's how to say. Every people have their own story, so there are many different things about that. For someone, it's just to be. Oh no, I can't find the English word. To be in the community, to be in. Can you help me, Marcel?
Belonging.
Yeah, belonging.
Yeah.
That's for someone. And someone else perhaps tells about when something bad happens in your life, you feel like someone is carrying you, is helping you. So there are different answers to that as well.
And I guess tradition is also a strong argument for a lot of people that is important. Now you can put a lot of words into the concept of tradition, what it really means, because it can mean a lot of things, but that is important for many families. We have always done it in my family, and we keep that legacy going on, really. So I think tradition, the faith, and of course for many families, it was also the opportunity to have a small party or whatever for perhaps it, at least with the first child, it could be that the couple isn't married yet, so it will be the first opportunity for both families to meet and so on before they're married. So yeah.
And some families, parents also talks about it like an insurance. They say it's the best to do. It's best to do it. Like if you don't, perhaps something bad could happen. But that's also what some says.
And then there's the last question that I've got so far in the chat from Henrik Bundgaard, who asks, how can we as church communicate the very essence and meaning of being baptized? How can we communicate the value of being baptized? I think this relates to the question of, or it relates to what you just said, and it relates to the question that I mentioned earlier, the relation between content and form in the communication of baptism. What sort of theology are we communicating, and what is the sort of norm? Is there a normative content, or do we just adapt to the audience, so to say? What is our goal? Ingeborg, we talked about this in the Norwegian language group. Maybe you could elaborate a little on this, and then I will give the word to the people from Lund.
Yeah, it's actually, I find the question interesting, but then I also, what we've been discussing a lot here in Church of Norway and the National Council is how we are, I think in general, we are very sender oriented. We are, I think, very often too focused on what we want to say. We are really not enough focused on what are the needs of the receiver end. And when it comes to theology, and what we talked about in our breakout room is I mentioned that we are planning a new campaign, and we have had a huge discussion on sort of not really the theology behind, but how do we communicate it? Because that campaign will be towards what we call the yellow group. And they are not really, I mean, if we talk about baptism being the gift from God, that's a very internal language. I'm really interested in how do we communicate? How do we talk about the theology behind the baptism? And we have to realize, I think, that our language is sort of, for a lot of people, it's not possible to understand it. And that might not be the kind of the main reason why they choose baptism. It's in Norway, at least, it's very often tradition. It's culture. And it could be sort of like you said, like an insurance, or it could be, you know, something they think it's okay. But we try to sort of that all the campaigns, everything we do should lead into the website, that we are very eager for people to actually click and get into the website, because there they find sort of more of the story behind. But we are also there, we are not kind of dumping a lot of the theology on them, because that comes a bit further down the line in a way. But this is a discussion, and I don't think there's kind of one answer to it. But I think that we as church communicators, we have to realize that what we know and sort of our knowledge is might be too internal focused in a way. And I think that's a huge challenge, and we should work on it. And we are right now, we're working a lot on our main website and how we talk about baptism there, to actually get rid of, like, the first filter should not be sort of baptism being the gift of God, etc., that type of language. We're actually trying to avoid it. Yeah.
Okay, others of the presenters that want to comment on this? Lena,
Yeah.
Marcel, Lena, yes.
Yeah. I think we also must take the personal in with your two things, because I think that's also important, that we are starting to tell, each one of us, to tell about baptism, to tell why we think it's important. And because we also found out with some of the like the people in the board, they told us that they had children and grandchildren that weren't baptized, and we asked them then, okay, did you talk about baptism with them and ask them why they didn't? No, it's too private. We don't talk about that. So I also think I don't think it's of course we have to tell the story together as well, but I also think that it's really important that each one of us starts to talk about it.
Can I just add a small comment on that? I totally agree with you. And what we've done, And that's actually, we kind of stole the idea from Denmark, where we have created lots of small films like the one I mentioned on the website, where we actually have tried to dive into these different conversations that couples and families have around baptism. For instance, one of the parents say, no, I don't want my child to be baptized. The other one wants to do it. Or there could be, lots of different reasons. And we sort of try to actually find out more. So it's possible I know that grandparents, for instance, have directed their children who are considering whether their baby should be baptized to this website and said, okay, read about, this story here, because there are couples and of course all of them ends the way we want them to end. In the end they choose to baptize their child, but still it's all these very kind of common discussions that a lot of couples have. For instance, we think that the child should choose him or herself. We shouldn't make the choice. And of course, it's really, that's the most common reason for not baptizing in Norway, but also the most common reason for baptizing. So it's, you can take a look at them if you understand Norwegian to see if that's something to do.
Do the presenters from Finland and Iceland want to comment this question? If not, we can move on to another question, which is related from Jonas Jørgensen, who asks, I would be interested in knowing more about the communication about drop-in baptism. What is communicated in Church of Sweden and Lund on the meaning of baptism? Would Lena or Marcel comment on that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
When you communicate about drop-in baptisms,
yeah,
what do you communicate?
The same thing as you communicate in other baptism. I'm not.
Sorry, I allow just to,
Jonas, please.
Yes, to explain what I mean. In your presentation, referred to newspaper articles on drop-in baptism.
Yeah.
And I was interested whether the communication on baptism is similar when you communicate infant baptism or drop-in baptism, on the meaning of baptism. Would you communicate the similar thing or something different when it comes to drop-in baptism? Is it a sort of framed differently, the meaning of the baptism?
No.
So
no, it's the same. It's the same. The meaning,
right.
It's the same. It's just another sort of method to do it. Yeah.
It's just a form that really.
Yeah.
What we saw in one of our parishes, that was in kind of a socially economic, not so well-off area. Well, if you have the images that is portrayed, for instance, with a royal family or so on, you can have some preconceptions that it has to be in a certain way. You have to have so and so many guests at the baptism, and if I'm a single parent, I don't have those kind of resources. So how can it be still something that is for me? So that can be one way to complete the total image of it. But the message in its core is really the same.
Okay. There is a question here from Christian Arfman, who says that these days the topic of baptism is treated more positively and with more interest in the media in Denmark. For example, famous people sharing why they chose to be baptized at a late age. Is it the same in other Nordic countries? What do you experience regarding the public attention of baptisms?
I can, I mean, we haven't sort of tried to tell the story of any kind of famous people or anything like that, but we have drop-in baptism is easy to, I mean, local media is very interested, and also regional media. And but of course we have been very careful, because obviously it's a especially with teenagers, we really don't want to push them into telling their story in media. They are, even if they are, I mean, 15, 16, we are just in general very careful. But there have been some stories, and they have been very well received within media, and it's popular in a way. But we, we haven't. I know that in Denmark you had one of the most famous actors there being baptized as an adult, and who told his story. We haven't had anything like that. We haven't really looked for it either. So yeah.
And that's the same in Sweden. The National Church hasn't had that campaign, but there are in some parishes that they have lifted. We have, I don't know if you know him, Danny Saucedo. There was one parish in Stockholm who used him.
Of course, in both in Norway and Sweden, we have, and in Denmark as well, we have royal families who have, and as you mentioned from the Swedish presentation, and that happens in Norway too, and that's when that type of ceremony is sent in television and so on. That's of course also creates interest. I have a question here from Mogensen, which I think it's really on the, maybe you could propose your question yourself, Mogens. It's really on this how to communicate the content and which language to use.
Yeah, it's really meant for Ingeborg. She said that we have a problem about communicating because we're using an internal language, and we should be very careful which language we're using in order to be able to communicate about baptism. My question is it mainly a language question? I mean, a technical, cultural question, or is there maybe a mismatch between what the church somehow thinks about baptism, or its theology, or its teaching, and then what those we are communicating are really interested in?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't think we really know. I mean, we have been doing surveys before campaigns to find out why people think that they will baptize their children, or why not. And we know that, for instance, tradition and culture are important factors. But I probably don't really have the answer, and I think that we are still kind of looking into this. But I think in general that we are, as I said, very sender oriented, and we think that, you know, we have so much to tell about baptism and why they should baptize their children, and so that I just wonder that sometimes we are maybe not really able to kind of meet the expectations in a way. You could also say that this is also a symptom of a lack of knowledge of Christianity, at least in Norway, and I'm quite sure it's the same in your countries as well, that we see that the general knowledge about Christianity, about the Christian belief, etc., about the Bible stories is going down. So that, and when you don't have this kind of basic knowledge about the Christian belief and the Bible, it's more difficult to communicate, because some of the language that you would think would be easy to understand might be actually very difficult to understand. And I think that's in general something we really need to deal with on our websites. And I think at least for Sweden and Denmark, that's the same. I did a master in rhetorics where I compared the websites, the welcome pages on the Danish and Swedish and the Norwegian websites, and also the pages on baptism. And I think in general that we are not enough focused on the receiver.
And you have to unmute your microphone.
Sorry, there's a related question from Henrik Bundgaard Nielsen, who says that if we try to focus more on what people want and ask for, what kind of more common needs among people can be answered or fulfilled through baptism? Maybe you want to elaborate a little more on your question?
Yes, it's related to also what Ingeborg said now, that we have to focus more on the receivers, and if we try to focus on what the people in common need, what their interest is, what in the baptism can we use to correspond with the needs in the people among us.
Very difficult question. I don't know, but I don't know. But I think that what we discuss here, at least, is that all these, I mean, the baptism, the weddings, also funerals, and is sort of, that's the kind of the meeting points between the church and the members who are not active, but who wants to have some kind of relation with the church. And I think what we really want to show people is that the church can be part of your life and add meaning to your life in different ways. And I don't know if it's sort of to fulfill needs. That's because maybe people will say that we don't really need the church today, and we want to sort of challenge that. And I think that, of course, when do we have a lot of people in the church? We meet a lot of people through the baptism when people come to the church, maybe with their friends and families. It's an opportunity, and I just wonder if we really use that opportunity in the best way all the time. I don't know. It's I don't really have the answer, and I think it's an important question, and yeah. Something that we should definitely need to elaborate further. I don't know if Sweden or Denmark or if some of the other countries have some good what do you say, info on this.
I was thinking about what you're saying about the opportunity, because I also think there is opportunity when parents say that they want their children to self-decide when they are a bit older, if they are going to be baptized. How do we sort of tell them about baptism if we don't meet them? If they don't come to church, how do we do to meet them and tell them about baptism? How will that be a choice for them? Yeah, that's an opportunity. And now I think with the pandemic, there's a lot of infants that hasn't been baptized. I think we have some years now that we really have to think about that. How do we, as the church, tell about baptism for them so it will be a choice that they perhaps will take, or at least a choice that they will say, I don't want that, or I want that.
Karin Tilberg has asked for the word. Karin, please.
Thank you. I would like to give a comment to this question from the Swedish breakout group, and not just today, but also from previous webinars, because we've discussed baptism as a way of interpreting your life. And I think that is in relation to both this question, but also the previous one on the church's teachings. I think that's the learning experience that we need to give those we meet, that how to inform them and how to tell them about baptism as a way of life and as a way of interpreting whatever happens. I know that there was one in the Swedish group a few webinars ago who said, what if we can talk about baptism as something to hold on to if you're bullied at school, or baptism as something that can help you in everyday life, and I think that is one way of being receiver oriented, but still taking the responsibility of educating about the church's teachings on not just baptism, but several other teachings as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Karin. I would like to comment a little bit from Icelandic perspective. Quite interested in this Ingeborg's talk about the receivers and the message that we have and the language we use and the questions that Mogens was posing regarding that. Because I think we all experience in the churches that we have a rather antiquated church language, and we have concepts that are absolutely close to the general public. And one of the key concepts in baptism is grace. And I am fairly certain, given my discussions with lots of confirmants, that grace is one of the words that it's not a common word in Icelandic, and that they don't understand it. So it just gives us a lot of food for thought when it comes to, you know, how do we communicate? What words do we use? What pictures do we grab and use to explain what we mean? I had written down another question. Anyway, we are getting close to the end of this session, so I would like to ask Harald if there are any final questions, or if we are.
I think there are some comments and proposals in the chat, which is sent to everyone, I think. But I think it will take too much time to go in detail into that. There was just one concrete question to Ingeborg, whether the survey she was referring to is available somewhere. I guess it has to do with the colors.
Yeah, if it's a membership survey, that's on Kirken.no. Of course, it's in Norwegian, but you can find both the 2019 and the 2020. We have two, and there is another one coming now. So that's available on our website.
Great. Well, it's time to come. The time has come to say goodbye, and I would like to thank you all for participating in this webinar. Especially like to thank our speakers today: Ingeborg Dybvig, Lena Andersson, Marcel Salinder, Halldór Reynisson, and Laura Hanna Kokkonen, and all those who participated. This is the fourth webinar that we have in this series this spring. We are planning further in the autumn. Our next webinar is in only 10 days. That will be on Thursday, May 20th. And there we will focus on the theology. So the title is The Meaning of Baptism in Our Time. And I think that is good when we combine it with questions that were, for example, raised from Laura about the branding of baptism, what are we communicating actually by all our speakers today. So there is a direct link between the two. What are the resources for a contemporary baptismal theology is the sub-question here. That would be in 10 days. I look forward to seeing as many as possible of you again then. And I hope you all have a good day. Thank you very much.